Pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom.
Pray for us.
St. Thomas Aquinas.
Pray for us.
St. Peter.
Pray for us.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. All right, let's get into it. This will be our last class of the year. And then we'll take a break so people can go away on holidays and not miss out. Father Boyce has been chugging along, no doubt, and we've got some very, very good material. From now on, all the classes now are packed full of really solid answers to the main questions and questions against the proofs for whatever it is, and we're looking obviously at the resurrection now. So today we're going to look at a strategy of the argument for the resurrection. Okay, so this is how we're going to put together a strategy to argue for the resurrection. We're going to put down 5 possible theories. So let's get that up. The strategy of the argument for the resurrection. Strategy of the argument for and we've got 5 possible theories. Okay, so I'll read out the first little bit. We believe that Christ's resurrection can be proved, obviously, with at least as much certainty as at any universally believed and well-documented event in ancient history. So we're looking at something from 2,000 years ago, and people say Cleopatra was the Queen of Egypt. Okay, that's an historical event that happened. Was she actually a person called Cleopatra? Was she the Queen of Egypt? Can we prove it? It's an historical event. So we are claiming the same thing here as an historical event. We reckon we can prove it as well as we can any other historical event. To prove this, we don't need to presuppose anything controversial at all, like, say, miracles happen. We're just going to look at it in a different manner. But the skeptic must also not presuppose anything, e.g., that they do not. We do not need to presuppose that the New Testament is infallible or divinely inspired or even true. We don't need to presuppose any of these things. We do not need to presuppose that there really was an empty tomb or post-resurrection appearances as recorded. We're just going to walk in there without any of these presuppositions. We need to presuppose only 2 things, both of which are hard data. Okay, so our presuppositions have to be hard data, empirical data, which no one denies. The existence of the New Testament texts as we have them, and the existence of the Christian religion as we have it today. So these are the 2 things that we know as hard facts, don't we? We know there's a Bible, and we know there's a Christian religion today. These are hard facts. And we go from these 2 points. The question is this: which theory about what really happened in Jerusalem on that first Easter Sunday can account for the data? So let's put down our hard facts. Number 1. The existence of the New Testament texts. They're a fact. And the second one is the existence of the Christian religion as we find it today. Okay. our question is, which theory about what really happened in Jerusalem on the first Easter Sunday can account for the data. There are 5 possible theories. These are the 5 possible theories. 1, Christianity. 2, hallucination. 3, myth. 4, conspiracy. And 5, swoon. Remember, the data that we're talking about is the data that there was a resurrection. Okay, and we're going to come back to what the swoon means in a short while. So I'm going to diagram this, and our diagram hopefully is going to put us into a clear frame of mind as to how we're going to look at this issue. So let's look at 2 possibilities here. Jesus died. And the second one is Jesus didn't die. Okay, so these are 2 possibilities. All right, looking at these 2 possibilities as they are, if Jesus died, we accept that let's just say we're accepting that Jesus died. Then we've got 2 possibilities after Jesus died, didn't we? What are the 2 possibilities after he died?
What happened to his body?
No. What are the 2 possibilities after Jesus died?
He either resurrected or he didn't.
That's right. Jesus rose, Jesus didn't rise. Really clear. First possibility, Jesus rose. Second possibility, Jesus didn't rise. Okay, right, we all agree with that. So, if we were to look at the final consequence that Jesus has risen from the dead, number 1, Christianity. Make sense? Christians say, Jesus died, Jesus rose from the dead, Christianity says that. Let's look at number 2. The apostles were deceived. Jesus didn't die. And if this was the case, then we would call this an hallucination. They were just deceived, they had hallucinations. They thought that he'd risen from the dead. Jesus didn't rise. Then, the next possibility is that the apostles were myth makers. In which case, this would be a myth. The next possibility is that the apostles were deceivers. And this becomes number 4, which is conspiracy. And then lastly, Jesus didn't die. In fact, he looked like he was dead, but he was actually just swooning, appearing as if he was dead, and that's how he was able to finally recover from his injuries and walk around later. Okay, from the data that we have, either Jesus died or Jesus didn't die. Regards. And then we have 5 possible theories. Christianity, the theory of Christianity. Secondly, hallucination of the apostles. Thirdly, myth that the apostles have made up. Fourthly, the apostles were just myth makers. Fourthly, the apostles were a bunch of deceivers and they made the whole story up, therefore a conspiracy. And lastly, Jesus didn't die at all, as the Muslims claim. They claim that he was just badly wounded but swooning, and later on he was able to appear to people alive as a human being, and therefore it was only a swoon. In actual fact, therefore he didn't die. Okay? So this is how we approach these 5 possible theories. And remember, we have no preconceived notions going into this. We're not saying that the Bible is miraculous or the Bible is the Word of God or miracles exist or anything like that. No preconceived. We just look at the hard data that we're looking at there. Jesus, obviously, we were talking about his existence. He exists. Then we're just looking at whether he died or he didn't die. Because there's an argument for the resurrection. If Jesus is walking around a month after he's been executed, then either one of these two have to have happened. Either he died or he didn't. If he did die, then he either rose from the dead or he didn't rise from the dead. Because, remember, the resurrection has happened. He's walking around because we have a book that tells us that he was walking around. So how can this be? Either he rose from the dead or he didn't rise from the dead. That's if he actually died. And then we go through all these possibilities. Remember, number 1 is Christianity, and Christianity claims that he's God, and therefore he's risen himself from the dead. So it's one of the possibilities, the 5 theories we have. Questions on that? Okay. So let's look at these before we go into the refutation of these theories. So when we do the refutation, we'll refute these theories going from number 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 and finding out that these ones can't actually be right. But first of all, we'll just look at the situation, first of all, in the general. So everybody got this down? Can I remove that? Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. All right. Theories 2 and theory 4. The hallucination, the apostles were deceived, and the apostles were deceivers. They theories 2 and 4 constitute a dilemma. If Jesus didn't rise, then the apostles who taught that he did We're either deceived or deceivers. All agree with that? Much have to. Modernist scholars. So a modernist is somebody who doubts pretty much all of this and authentication or anything that's coming from the past. They just, oh no, we have more idea now, we're more clued in now, we don't believe this actually happened, we don't believe this actually. We have real great doubters about the accuracy of anything old. They just want modern examples and answers to absolutely everything, and so perpetual doubters about the authenticity of Christianity. So modernist scholars couldn't escape this dilemma until they came up with a middle category. Myth. You see how that plays out? Obviously the apostles are a key part of our diagram, aren't they? Because they are the ones who wrote openly, died for this, mentioned it around to everybody else that Jesus rose from the dead. So either these guys were deceived or they were deceivers themselves. Pretty clear, isn't it? And so therefore the modernist scholars, many of whom are Christians, are claiming, well, you know, so they're either saying, well, these guys are liars or they were deceived. Hang on, we're in a bit of a dilemma here. We're basing everything on Christianity and what they've written. We Christians, we believe that there's a God, and we believe that Jesus Christ is involved in all this, but we're not precise on any of our theology. So how do we explain this? Because we're going to rubbish the apostles, full stop. So they come up with a third category, the myth category. And it's the most popular alternative today. You go to a school and they'll say, well, the Bible's mainly myth. What? It's the people who wrote it were... But they say, oh, it's not really deception, it's just... It gets caught in the sands of time, it just becomes myth. You know, it gets truth and story, story they embellish and know they were doing it, sort of thing. So they end up with this mushy middle category. So, thus, either, one, the resurrection really happened, two, the apostles were deceived. Deceived by a hallucination. Is it an hallucination? An hallucination. Americans don't know the difference. Pardon?
Only Cockneys drop the H.
3, the apostles created a myth. 4, the apostles were deceivers. 'Who conspired to foist is to trick, basically push upon people in order to trick them, to foist on the world the most famous and successful lie in history? Quite a bit tall order, isn't it? Ever. Or 5. Jesus only swooned and was resuscitated. Not resurrected. Right, all 5 possibilities are logically possible. Do we agree with that? Logically, we're talking logic, there are possibilities, they are logically possible, aren't they? Each one of these, there's a logic in there. And therefore must be fairly investigated. Even number 1 has to be fairly investigated, Christianity, because it's one of the 5 possibilities. Look at it fairly. These are also the only possibilities, because we're looking at it within the scope of not adding anything else. We're talking about the data that we've got. There's a claim that Jesus rose from the dead, so we've got to look at the possibilities. There are no other possibilities in this, unless we include really far-out ideas that anybody responsible would never take seriously, that Jesus was a Martian and came in a flying saucer or something like that. There's nutters out there who are going to push types of things like that at us. Or that he never even existed, the whole story is the world's greatest fantasy novel, written by some simple fisherman, that he was a literary character, whom everyone in history mistook for a real person. I mean, including all Christians and their enemies. They also took him and made it up. And some scholar, many centuries, really got the real scoop from sources unnamed. So we'd push these to the side because we're actually looking at the data. And Roman data itself suggests that there was this person called Jesus Christ and that he was put to death, and then the claim that his followers said that he rose from the dead. So we're just going on the historical data and then we're working with that. We're leaving all nutter theories out to the side. Okay, if we can refute theories 2, 3, 4 and 5, we will have proved the truth of the resurrection, wouldn't we? Okay, so that's one of the things that we are going to look at. The form of the argument here is similar to that of most of the arguments for the existence of God. Neither God nor the resurrection are directly observable, but from the data that are directly observable, we can argue the only possible adequate explanation is the Christian one. So that's how we look at these things. We just look at the data that we can observe, rather than just saying, oh, what about this? What about the miracles that happen later? Let's just work on the data that we've got. So, okay, we'll go through the 4 non-believing ones, and we're going to, as I said, we're going to go from number 5, then 4, then 3, then 2. Questions on that? It's all fun. It's, I wonder what will happen. Will we prove to a great degree? When you look at situations like this, in this detached manner, and put out the possibilities that have to exist you recognise that there's not 1,000 different possibilities. There's only a few possibilities out there in terms of the Christian claim that Jesus Christ was a person who actually lived on the world. So if you can agree with that, whether you and your enemies can say, okay, yeah, believe, prepared to, okay, then either he died or he didn't. Okay. And so I'm prepared to accept that. The Romans even said that, he's put it, okay. And then we look at these and we look at that, and then there are no other further possibilities outside of that. Either Christianity is true or it's one of these other ones. Unless they're prepared to add more in, which they're going to find hard to do. Anyway, so let's look through. So the refutation of the swoon theory, 9 arguments.
Here we go.
Okay. It takes up quite a page. It takes up a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, that's good. Okay. Number 1. Jesus could not have survived crucifixion. That's a pretty good argument.
The Romans were good at what they did.
They were well practiced. And it was a military organisation as well, so you didn't do your job properly, you ended up on the cross. So we look at that one pretty seriously. Roman procedures were very careful. Very careful. To eliminate that possibility. Roman law even laid the death penalty on who?
Soldiers.
Yeah. Any soldier who let a capital prisoner escape. In any way. Including bungling a crucifixion. It was never done. I mean, this one had an enormous crowd. There were truckloads of people watching this, okay? Most of whom were baying for his blood. They bungled this, there would have been a huge crowd on them not getting it right. Alright, that's our first argument. Pretty solid one there, but we've got 8 more. Swoon's not off to a good start, just quietly. The fact the Roman soldiers not break Jesus' legs. Roman soldier, sorry. as he did to the other two crucified criminals. John 19, 31 to 33. Means that the soldier was sure Jesus was dead. How hard would it have been for the executioning soldier to break Jesus' legs? I mean, he's just broken the legs of the other two crucified. How hard was it to break his legs? Super easy, eh? I mean, he's stuck on a cross. He's not going anywhere, and you've got a huge, big fuller's club there. The head of the fuller's club is around about the size of a handball, so around about 15 centimetres across. And the rest of it comes down into a small handle. It's a massive club with a huge big end on it. You basically walk up to someone like that, you just smash into their shins and you just smash the leg into pieces. Why do they do that?
So they'll come quicker.
How are they going to die?
Asphyxiate.
Asphyxiate them, okay? Because once those legs are smashed, you can't push off the nails. You have to breathe by pulling yourself up from your hands. And therefore, after a while, you have no strength and you die through asphyxiation. So it's no problem. He's just smashed the other two. And he walks over to Jesus. Oh, he's dead. Oh, I'll smash it anyway. No, he's dead.
I suppose that's sorry for his mother.
Perhaps. But
Like, they finish him off.
There's no point breaking his legs if he's already dead.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of breaking his legs is to kill him faster.
yeah,
But he's
Just
already
make,
dead.
just to make sure, the fifth wound. Just to
Make
make
sure,
Oh
just
yeah.
stab him through the chest.
yeah, that's right. So the stab comes later as well. Breaking the legs hastened the death. So it's more merciful to put him to death that way. So even if his mother is in agony, put him to death by just breaking his legs. Hasten the death so that the corpse can be taken down before the Sabbath. Verse 31 of the above. Okay? Number 3. Getting pretty concrete, we've only had 2 of them. John, an eyewitness, certified that he saw blood and water coming from Jesus' pierced heart. That's John 19, 34, 35. This shows that Jesus' lungs had collapsed. and he had died of asphyxiation. Any medical expert can vouch for that. Vouch for this, I should say. Number 4. The body was entirely encased in winding sheets. And entombed. John 19:38-42. Why is that an important refutation?
He would have suffocated if he wasn't going to do it.
Exactly. The entire encasing of the body in large amounts of winding material and linen cloth would have suffocated him. Because they even covered up the face. There was first of all a cloth put over the face, and then they wind the body up, including winding it over the face. I mean, they put first of all the piece over the face, and he would lie him down on a long piece of linen cloth, and then double that linen cloth back over, and then wrap it all up. So basically not mummifying him, but they were putting the body away and wrapping it up so that after the Sabbath they can come back and do the proper burial rites on it. But in the meantime, entirely encased in winding sheets, and he would have suffocated and they wouldn't have been able to breathe. All right. I'm going to wipe that out. We all got that down?
Was this taken into consideration, Father, the absolute beating that he would have had before all of this?
No.
Scourging alone.
The chances of surviving blood loss alone probably would have killed him. It doesn't even take that into account. The survival, the chances of survival, I suppose, and it's another possibility of a swoon theory. The chances of physical survival of any one of the forms of torture that he had, like the crown of thorns, was enough, because piercing vessels around your head, the vast amount of blood that pours out from a head, and he's wearing that thing for a number of hours. He's losing incredible amounts of blood from around his head. Especially when he's carrying the cross, because that's constantly pushing against his crown of thorns. The scourging alone itself, he would have lost several pints of blood at that point in time. So the amount of blood, having had the sweat of blood the night before, his physical strength would have been remarkably low by the time they then put the nails in him. And the nails were touching arteries, in the hands, and once they're touching the arteries in the hands, it's no surprise that he dies on the cross within those 3 hours, because the shock to the system alone would be enough to kill a lot of people, and then the physical beating as well. So, it was an absolutely brutal torture that he underwent. So for his being able to actually survive that, I think the chances of his recovery of any way, shape, or form would be zero. Not to mention just the points that we wrote up there, the fact that soldiers are so good at what they're doing and are watching absolutely everything, but the depth of horror that he's undergone and the physical injuries that he's undergone. And then you put a spear through his heart. No, the chances of him just being in a swoon and surviving that are zero. And I think anybody who's claiming that, as the Muslims do, are just ignoring the reality of fact. Again, we're going on data that we know. How good were the Romans at executing people? Did they do this very often? Like every week. A malefactor or a criminal or someone would be put to death. It was a common occurrence in Roman, especially in an outpost like that, where you had to treat people with this real harshness. If anybody broke the laws against the Roman, anybody threw a petrol bomb or something like that at anything Roman, they caught them, they executed them. And they were not bad at it, they were very, very effective at it. Okay, so number 5. The post-resurrection appearances convinced the disciples. Even doubting Thomas. Okay, so he was pretty adamant. Absolutely no chance. We were watching it from a distance, hiding behind things, but there was no chance that Jesus was gloriously alive. John 20:19-29. It is psychologically impossible. Psychologically impossible for the disciples to have been so transformed. And confident if Jesus had merely struggled out of a swoon. Badly in need of a doctor. Like, think about this. Every single one of those apostles and disciples, they'd seen a crucifixion before. It's not something that's the first one they'd ever gone to. They've seen crucifixion. They've seen the state of someone who's been crucified. They know. Once and especially having seen what he's gone through and the state his body was in, they're absolutely and utterly convinced he's dead. Nothing's going to change their mind. He's dead. We saw it. We saw his body on the cross. We saw the terrible shape he was in. We know the Roman soldiers. We saw they pierced his heart. We know. There's absolutely no way that they could all of a sudden, Jesus, oh really? Yeah, I can't believe it. No, it doesn't work that way. Humans don't work that way. A half dead, staggering, sick man who has just had a narrow escape is not worshipped fearlessly. As divine Lord and conqueror of death. Okay, number 6. How were the Roman guards at the tomb overpowered by a swooning corpse? Or by unarmed disciples. And if the disciples did it, they knowingly lied when they wrote the Gospels. And are we into the conspiracy theory? Oh, let's leave that. So are we into the conspiracy theory, which we will refute shortly. So obviously if they've come in and rescued him and found him alive, then and they've covered that up and wrote another story, and so then you start getting conspiracy theories after that. So. Okay. Number 7. Stating the obvious, number 7. How could a seriously wounded man have moved the great stone at the door of the tomb? Who moved the stone, if not an angel? Especially when the Gospel tells us clearly that there's an enormous stone having been rolled in front of the tomb, which means some seriously big, strong, beefy men all had to work together to move a stone. I don't know if any of you have actually had to push some big things around out in nature, like a large, let's just say, example, a trunk of a tree. So those that tree across the road, it's got a trunk about that size. Okay, what's that about? 40 centimetre diameter across that trunk. And if that trunk is only 6 feet long, 2 metres long, and 40 centimetres across, that trunk is going to weigh, just that trunk of wood is going to weigh 400 kilograms. Okay, now if you're talking a stone, and the stone is the size of, even if it's a metre by a metre, which was possible to try and get into a tomb, which would be a hole in the rock, and you've got a stone that's a metre by a metre, you're looking at over a ton of weight, if not 2 to 3 tons. So in order to move that, you're looking half a dozen extremely strong men using bars and wood and everything to try and get some fulcrum just to be able to move it, because you can't push a 2-ton stone on rocky ground. You might be able to push it across a wooden floor if it doesn't fall through the floor, or a stone floor or something like that. But to move a stone that big, you need a large number of extremely powerful men. Men. Anybody can do it? No. Okay, but a seriously wounded man from the inside. Yeah, righto. No one has ever answered that question. So this question. Neither the Jews nor the Romans would move it because it wasn't in their interest. It wasn't in their interest to keep the tomb sealed. I mean, the Romans said, definitely keep this thing with his followers. And the Jews said, make sure you put a guard there because his followers said he's going to rise from the dead. So it's not in the favour of the Jews or Romans to move the stone. So they're not going to do it. So it's either going to be the apostles turning up with a bunch of guys up against armed soldiers who are facing the death penalty if they let him go. So they're going to fight for their lives. But no, and they're unarmed. Not likely. And they put the stone there in the first place, and the Roman guards would be killed if they let the body escape, so to speak. Okay? So the story the Jewish authorities spread that the guards fell asleep and the disciples stole the body. This is unbelievable, isn't it? And I don't say the word is just, oh, come on, unbelievable. I say it is actually, you cannot believe that. We cannot. We must refuse that as absolute myth, turning the tables back on them. Because guards fell asleep, and while they were asleep, tiptoeing disciples came along and miraculously, somehow or other, rolled a 2 to 3 ton stone away. Silently. While guards who were fearing for their lives and were used to staying on night watches, because that's their job, so they have to do this. If you're on night watch on the city walls of Jerusalem, you're on night watch on the city walls of Jerusalem. If you're caught sleeping on the night watch of the city walls of Jerusalem, guess what happens? Well, you have severe beatings, first of all, and then more than likely they put you to death. But on this particular job, of which the Romans have been told by the Jews, everybody said that he's going to escape and he's going to walk around. Okay, so Pontius Pilate's going, right, I want double guard, and I want them on severe warning that there is a possibility of something going to happen. But amazingly, they all fell asleep, and they were in such a deep sleep that they slept right through the moving of a 3-ton stone by 20 men who tiptoed in. We cannot believe that.
The soldiers typically don't sleep deeply anyway. They're usually quite light sleepers.
Yeah.
Is another.
Yeah, and because that's part and parcel of being a soldier. You have to wake up at the first sign of anything. So therefore, soldiers generally, as you observe, they often sleep in short shifts. You sleep for 2 hours, you grab half an hour's sleep, and then you're up because you're used to that. That's what a soldier does. So the suggestion that this stone could be moved while the soldiers fell asleep, what a ridiculous idea. I mean, we have to reject that with all the force of which they reject Christianity. It's unbelievable, and Roman guards would not fall asleep on a job like that, and if they did, they would lose their lives, and even if they did fall asleep, the crowd and the effort, the noise would have made it an enormous boulder, would have wakened them. Furthermore, we are again into conspiracy theory with all its unanswerable difficulties. Okay, so we just don't, it's ridiculous. Yes?
I think isn't in scripture that the Jewish authorities actually paid them?
I don't know if that's in the scripture, no, but that was obviously, I mean, the soldiers, they would have gone back. They're fearing for their own lives. Are they going to make up a story? It's not going to work.
Well, you would want the most unbelievable story, like an angel came down and threw us back, and you wouldn't want to say we fell asleep. That would not go down. And because there'd be quite a few of them, if they could all back each other up with this.
Yeah, but okay, but not only that, but they saw it. So they saw it. Their whole lives can never be the same again, even though their life might only last an hour, but their life can never be the same again. I mean, if you stand outside there and an angel of God came down and was able to just move houses and trees and everything with a movement of its hand, you're going to be a changed person, aren't you? You've witnessed something more powerful than nature. You yourself witnessed it. You might be a simple soldier and everything, but all of a sudden this incredible light comes out from the centre of this tomb, and this boulder just gets rolled back by a human type being with wings on it.
You'd probably lose your mind if you hadn't seen anything like that. You'd probably be like a mental person. It
would be impossible for you to make up another story.
I wonder if they were martyrs. I wonder if they were...
It's possible, yeah. It's possible. They became Christians. Possible. We don't know about that, obviously, but many people were converted. But we don't hear that the Romans put them to death either. You don't hear that the soldiers were put to death for lying. It's not mentioned. And especially if we're assuming that there's 20 guards. If you're putting an armed guard to protect against a group coming to roll a stone away, you're not sending 5 guards there, are you? Because if a group are going to come to try and take the body of Jesus out, there's going to be a large number of them. A, to overpower the soldiers. B, to roll a stone away. In order to get away with this, you've got to bring a large group. So the Romans aren't putting 5 soldiers there. They're putting a large number of soldiers. We can say probably 20 soldiers, heavily armed. Swords, spears, armour. So all 20 of them aren't going to come along and say, we just fell asleep. They're going to say, okay, we were all awake. This power, this light, we were all of us overpowered by a non-human creature. And he walked out of the tomb. The light was overpowering. You can kill us, but we saw it. It was more powerful than anything human that we've ever seen. No human could ever have done this. That's the only thing they can say. It is the most radical thing, but it's so radical that they can only really say the truth. You couldn't make something like that up. Okay, guys, let's make up a story. I don't know. Let's just say, yeah, it's a good idea. No, I think it.
And there would be no reason to make up a story if there was nothing to assume that the body actually came out.
Yeah. So it's super powerful. The swoon argument's not really going a long way here, isn't it? All right, let's get to number 8, number 9. We've all got that down?
Yep.
So it seems very, very possible that, this is only the swoon that's sort of saying that he hasn't died. This is just the first of these ones. They're saying that he hasn't died, therefore he somehow or other got out of there because he was alive. What? Past 20 guards and he was mortally wounded, bleeding all over the place. Preposterous. Number 8. If Jesus awoke from a swoon, where did he go? Think this through. Okay? You're a living body to deal with now, not a dead one. Why did the body disappear? It's a living body. Okay, it's not New York City, it's not 25 million people standing around or something like that. You're in Holy Land in the year 33 AD, and Jesus is not dead, but somehow or other he's escaped. Where'd he go? Would he go to Arabia? How did he get there? Did he go to Egypt? How did he get there? There's Roman soldiers all over the place. The Jews are looking for him as well. Where'd he go? There's nothing written in the scriptures. There's nothing written anywhere else that he's appeared somewhere else. There's no record of him being anywhere other than around Jerusalem 40 days after his resurrection. There's no record. The only record anywhere is that he was around Jerusalem for 40 days. And even then, he would disappear sometimes. In fact, there's no sources anywhere in the first 50 years or 100 years or even 200 years after his resurrection, nothing writing about the existence of Jesus after those 40 days on earth. We hear things made up in the modern centuries that he married Mary Magdalene and had kids and all the rest of it, but there was no record of this, none anywhere, until people fantastically made this up centuries later. Surely there would have been a record of it somewhere.
And when you think about 200 years, from like now to the beginning of the 19th century or 1800s, like, that's a long time.
Really a long time. And people can make things up. But for the first 200 years, nothing is mentioned. Zero. But quite the opposite. All those people who are saying that he's risen from the dead are all on the same page. Surely somebody who said, well, actually, he was hanging out in southern Turkey, a nice little village up there, and found a beach there.
Or maybe the Mormons were correct and he actually went to America.
Right. He would have left some traces if he somehow or other. So we won't presume where did he go? Why no records? At all. Number 9. Most simply. The swoon theory necessarily turns into the conspiracy theory or the hallucination theory. Since the disciples testified that Jesus did not swoon. But really died and really rose. Alright, so when we think at the diagram that we drew, and Jesus died, Jesus did not die. The only one that's supported by Jesus did not die is the swoon theory. We've gone through 9 arguments there. I think we have refuted it absolutely. There's an absolute that he had to have died. The witnesses were so many. The execution was so effective. There's no traces of a living person walking around. The impossibility of getting out of the grave. All of these types of things. And yet, realistically, the swoon theory, it falls into, as we started to see by some of those other ones, if he did get out, then it starts to fall into either conspiracy or the hallucination theory. It's got to fall into one of those because the apostles made it really, really clear that he did die. They wrote about this. We all saw it. He died. So,
another one was that he walked to Emmaus with 2 apostles that were able-bodied. So he must have kept up with them.
Yeah.
So if he's, swoon, how did he keep up with them?
Exactly, and that's a long distance. Yeah, they walk 20 kilometres, and he's just been crucified. But 2 days later, he's walking 20 clicks pretty easily. No limp, nothing, no sore feet. So it seems that these 9 arguments have violated our principle about not presupposing the truth of the gospel texts, since we've argued from data in the gospels But a swoon theory does not challenge the truths in the texts. The swoon theory says just didn't die, which we refer to as data. It uses them and explains them by swoon rather than resurrection. So we use them. We argue from our opponent's own premises in this case. All right, so then we'll go on to the next one, the refutation of the conspiracy theory, 7 arguments. So we're going to look at the conspiracy theory now. These ones get long, of course, conspiracy theory. You can see what we're getting to in all this. It's so compelling, the argument, that it's just not possible for people to claim and really think that they've got something really, really strong to stand on unless they are prepared to go into all of this data that exists now and then say and tell us exactly how this happened. Conspiracy theory. Seven arguments. Okay, number 1. About why could the disciples have made up the whole story? So the question is, why couldn't the disciples have made up the whole story? Number 1. The apostles were either deceived or deceivers. Either supposition is difficult. For it is not possible to imagine that a man has risen from the dead. While Jesus was with them, he could sustain them. But afterwards, if he did not appear to them, who did make them act? These guys have gone from watching a crucifixion, seeing someone die, the last thought that can possibly go through their mind is, he'll rise from the dead by himself. And who's giving them that conviction of this? It's a pretty stupid theory that a human being, if he's only a human because he died, he's going to rise himself from the dead. No, I'll tell you what, I'm convinced of this now. You just don't make things like that up and be prepared to stand in front of a screaming mob and say it. Because there's only one result from that. Yeah.
And the other thing to think of is that they all abandoned him.
Yeah.
And then they came to their senses
Yeah.
and were...
Yeah, people who are abandoned don't just turn around, I've got a good theory, it's going to save my bacon. No, it won't. It's illogical in a certain sense that this turnaround has just come by their own conspiracy. The hypothesis that the apostles were, he used the word knaves. Anybody know what a knave is?
A rapscallion.
Yeah, so a great tricker, a public tricker of people, okay? A knave is quite absurd. Follow it out to the end. And imagine these 12 men (11 men, I suppose) after Jesus' death, and conspiring to say that he risen from the dead. This means attacking all the powers that be. We are all susceptible to fickleness, to change, to promises, to bribery. One of them had only to deny his story. Under these inducements, or still more, because of possible imprisonment, tortures and death, and they would all have been lost. Follow that out. That's actually this number one is from Pascal, the French, in his thoughts, Pascal's thoughts. Number 322, 310. The cruncher in this argument is the historical fact that no one weak or strong, saint or sinner, Christian or heretic, ever confessed freely or under pressure bribe or even torture that the whole story of the resurrection was a fake. A lie, a deliberate deception. Even when people broke under torture, denied Christ and worshipped Caesar, they never let that cat out of the bag. Never revealed that the resurrection was their conspiracy. Okay. I mean, obviously people gave up their faith under torture or whatever, and in giving up their faith, they never, I mean, we don't have the records of every single person who's given up their faith. They might have just said, no, Jesus not God, or whatever. And order, I accept Islam, whatever, under torture. But none of them said, oh, okay, yeah, we knew all along it was all made up. They just, no one's ever come out with that. It's that bizarre and ridiculous that somebody could actually have made the whole thing up. Right, so we're finishing there for the day. Some very good material in this, and we've still got plenty more to go. We've got these ones behind the 7 arguments for the conspiracy theory. After that, we're going to have 13 arguments for the refutation of the hallucination theory. And then 6 arguments for the myth theory. They are very long. I'm going to have to abridge that. That's pages long. Are you kidding me? Come on, man. And then some conclusions at the end of it. All right. And then some St. Thomas Aquinas objections. So we're going to have a couple more in that. So as for our, well, I'm going to stop the camera now anyway.